Hello and welcome to the Third Seat podcast. Today's episode is a little bit different. I'm here with Trina Curry, our managing partner at Third House. And we've had 3 episodes so far with 3 different guests, all of whom are at different stages in their journey. Various similarities. They've all created a business from nothing, but different in terms of their business models, in terms of the stages they're at, in terms of the challenges they've faced along the way. So we've had Louise Hill, first of all, who is the founder of Go Henry, currently at about 150 people and part of a bigger group now. We've had Zoe Shepherd from Social Shepherd, who has co-founded that business with her husband, Jack, and is currently at about 70 people with around 6.5 million turnover. And we've had Kieran Hukin, who is the co-founder of Swift Home, currently at about 50 people and around 35 million. So really different business models. But we're going to be talking today about the themes and actually the similarities that we've picked up through those 3 different episodes. So with that in mind, I'm going to hand straight over to you, Trina.
Well, thanks. What a joy and privilege it is to be sitting here discussing some of these brilliant businesses and incredible founders that we know and are lucky enough to work with. I have spent a lot of time being in the third seat, listening to those first 3 podcasts that you've done with those businesses that you've just outlined. And I think the value here is in you and I having a conversation like we regularly have about some of the common themes, what we see, and how I suppose we think we can help these businesses navigate through some of these challenges, pain points, and get them where they're going quicker, easier, more successfully.
Yeah, and happier. And it's interesting actually, isn't it? Because one of the reasons we wanted to do a podcast in the first place was because we kept having these amazing conversations about our clients and sort of drawing those threads together and really thinking about, how you could apply what we saw in one business to another. And we kept saying it'd be great if the people we worked with could overhear these conversations. And although we've brought some amazing guests in, I think it's actually really nice to be sat here bringing that to fruition.
What really resonates is when we meet a new founder for the first time and we can say to them, don't worry, this happens all the time. This isn't anything to do with you personally or to do with how your business is running. This is part of the growth trajectory, and these are some of the pain points that come with scale, really.
We've seen this before. It's not you haven't done anything wrong. It's part of that journey that actually you do see a sort of visible breathing out. And
I think it happens both ways. It's one, dealing with founder, CEOs and having those conversations and what stage of their development and maturity they are at. But founder-led business, it can be a different animal, and particularly if somebody has come from something more predictable, more corporate. And again, it's highlighting that this is part and parcel of those types of environments.
Yeah. Great. Okay, should we get into it then?
Yeah, let's. Theme number 1 is about culture. And some people will already be having an allergic reaction to the use of that word because it can be really overused and sometimes very misunderstood as well. But all 3 of those podcasts all reference it in different ways. What I found really interesting was, I think in 2 out of the 3, there was a recognition of a culture drop. Yeah. Something happened. And you and I have spoken a little bit about this before, but what becomes clear is that you don't really need to work on culture very much when you are a small group. You're well gelled. Yeah. I think in the early stages, you're not necessarily recruiting and hiring people in a formal way. You're collecting people. It's your network and
assembling a team.
Yeah, exactly.
Or a group even, not a team necessarily from the off. Yeah,
exactly. And so that we don't need to give any focus to it. It just is there. It happens. That's what it is. And then as you start to grow, that's when things change. And what I think is really fascinating, if you've read, I'm sure you have read Sapiens.
Yeah.
And in Sapiens, and I think it's, don't let me misquote it, but I think it's Dunbar's layers of social relationships. But I just remember it from reading Sapiens, that you have these different groups, and there's the family group, and then there's the clan or the tribe, and then there's the community. And the close family group is 5 to 15 people, in inner circle, the immediate circle. And then you go into the clan, which happens sort of around 20, 30. And then once you get beyond 50, 60, then you're into community. And the larger the group, the less the culture is transmitted through the relationships, and the more you have to focus and design.
Yeah.
I always think about that. And I think it was 2 of those podcasts both spoke about the culture drop. I was thinking, I'd love to look at the timeline and see
how many people they were at when it happened. Yeah.
Because it's biology almost.
Yeah.
You get to that point. And how would you know, right? If you're a founder, if you're Zoe and she said, what 25, 23 when she started that business, how would you possibly know that that's what was going to happen?
Yeah.
You couldn't know, but it does happen. And you do have to get your arms around it the more that you grow. And I think sometimes that can feel like a frustration, or why do we have to do this? Why is it broken?
Why is it broken? And up until now, it's felt so organic. And so if we try and be more intentional, or we try and put some words to this or put it down on a page, then there seems to be always an inherent fear of breaking that magic spell and that organic culture that's grown until now. And I think, that's often the resistance to actively and intentionally creating that culture. But like you say, you can't depend on the relationships. It can't happen by osmosis and organically past a certain point. And actually, that's when you end up with factions, because the team splits into people that feel like they get each other. And you have to be more intentional to create the guardrails for that team, for that bigger team.
And you said magic. I think it was the conversation with Kieran.
Yeah,
where
he talks about it a lot.
Yeah, the magic. And when you have to start focusing on stuff, writing things down, it doesn't feel very magical. I can understand that. It feels probably a bit boring and a bit pedestrian.
Yeah.
That magic should continue to exist, but it can, but you have to be intentional about it. And I think that's where the work that we do helps, because again, it's reassuring people that you don't lose the magic. You actually take it to a wider audience, you perpetuate it, but you have to be able to put some focus into it, articulate it, share it with a wider audience.
Yeah. I think that's where you do need that external support to come in and help you zoom out, to be able to articulate what it is that's brilliant about how the business runs, in order that you can start to crystallise what your culture is. I don't think you can do that necessarily for yourself. Like Kieran talks about going on the course he went on with a couple of other people from within the business, and they spent a whole day needing that space or that objectivity of focus to come out from the detail and be able to zoom out and see it properly for what it is.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
The other thing about culture is, and that's why I said right at the beginning, I'm sure some people have an allergic reaction to it, because they'll think, it's bringing in some consultants, some words, and then we'll put it on the wall behind reception and that's the job done. And actually that's so far away from the truth. And I mean, I smile. I love it that Enron had their values, one of which was integrity.
Yeah.
The words are meaningless. And you may remember this from our previous life where we worked together. But one of the things that we built collectively as a team, one of those lines was, culture is nowhere unless it's everywhere. And it's in the small things. It's like building trust. It's not in the big set piece, sort of high days and holidays stuff. It's in how you are interacting every single day, in every single interaction. That's what builds your culture, and the culture that you are trying to perpetuate, because it's not just defining it, is it?
No.
it's then about how that plays through. And I think Louise was talking about the red book, the little red book, wasn't she? And
Yeah.
bringing that to life for everybody. But that's really what the culture is. It's not something that's printed on a sweatshirt and given out at the end of the year to everyone. It's how you behave every day.
It is in the daily, definitely. And actually, if you've got values on a wall and people are acting, to your Enron example, but loads of other businesses that we've come across over the years, if people are acting in a way that seems to counter what's on the wall, it's destructive.
But you're absolutely right. You put that up and then don't behave in that way, you have done a worse job than not sticking it up at all. So you have to be able to live by it. So going back to the themes and what I heard listening to those three founders talk about their business, they were all saying culture is really important for our success. And they were also saying sometimes if you've got your eye off the ball, it can drop. And when the culture drops, you lose engagement. And I think it was Kieran said, don't know what happened first. Was it poor decision making? But it dips. And as I say, you couldn't possibly know that as an individual getting into a business, unless you've got somebody sort of like going, hello, you're going to have to concentrate on this. Now you've got a team of 20 people. You're going to have to think about that. And you figure it out for yourself, right? Bright problem solver, founder types that we work with. But there's a little bit of pain until they get there.
I think even Louise talked about it actually, but she articulates it differently. She talks about that massive growth jump just after COVID.
Yeah.
And talks about, the mishires because they weren't clear on what they were hiring against.
Bums on seats.
And actually, not using culture as a good enough filter. And all of them talk about that. And I think that is really true of everyone we work with, that people and getting the right people and hiring well, especially during that scaling period, is so crucial to get right.
Well, that actually is another of the themes that comes out, is people. So it leads on really nicely from culture. And that correct hiring, and going back to what we were just talking about, the assembling, the collecting, and quite often what gets you here won't get you there.
Yeah.
Sometimes the people that you'd need in that early phase won't be with you for the whole journey because it's not right for them. It's not right for the business. I mean, I've said this throughout my career, and I say it a lot when I'm in one-to-one coaching, and I'll say it for the rest of my life. What is right for the business is right for the individual, is right for the business. It's all one and the same. And sometimes that's not that obvious, and sometimes there's some really painful decisions to be made. But ultimately, if those two things aren't aligned, the individual isn't going to grow and maximize their own potential, and nor are they going to be able to deliver what the business needs. Yeah. And people come and go, and it's either a reason, a season, or a lifetime. Yeah. And it's being brave enough, I suppose, to be able to see when those changes have to be made. But I think going back to the point that you just made, that clarity, that knowing comes from being clear what it is your business is doing, where it's going, what the strategy is, what the culture is. And then it helps, as you say, understand who you're bringing in. And also, as these things change and as the business develops and matures and progresses, it also helps you see what it is you need for the next phase.
100%. It's interesting because we talk, don't we, in Third House about person, role and system, and really thinking intentionally through those three layers. And I think every single one of them talks about hiring for fit rather than skills. And it's really interesting because often when you're hiring in a business, you write a job description, you hire for role, but when that person lands, you judge them on the sort of person they are. And if you're not clear at a systemic level and all that culture stuff and really understanding what you are about as a business, that's when you mishire because you only hire for role. You're not clear enough on the sort of people that you need. And I think in a scaling business, when it has been so close-knit as well, the organisational immune system can go off pretty severely against mishires. It's not about your face fitting. It's about how people work and how people think and making sure that you're hiring what you need in that business to build those relationships with people and that people are going to fit together, that's when it goes wrong, right? And that's when it feels like you look back and you think, yeah, we made some big mishires along the way.
Yeah, and the
You're
reason,
smiling.
The reason I'm smiling so much is going back to that person role system, because when the business starts out, it is a collection of individuals.
They are the system.
Correct. They are individuals doing roles, sometimes multiple roles, sometimes multiple people doing the same role. You know, it can be all a little bit of a muddle. And that ultimately creates the system. No one's defined the system at this point, by the way.
No.
It just is. It just exists as a function of the individuals that you have got. I know this is a podcast and I'm using my hands to show the different layers of person, role, system.
You'll have to imagine that.
Yeah,
if you're
have to imagine that. Persons at the bottom, roles in the middle, systems at the top. But I think what happens then, exactly as you've just described, is the organisation starts to grow. You need to have more people. So then you recruit, but you start then with the role. We need to have an X. We need a marketing manager, whatever it is. And so then you recruit and you bring an individual into that role. But actually, if you've not spent any time defining the system, then that person can struggle to fit because they're not one of the original individuals. And so again, it's about being intentional in what you're doing, and I guess setting out your stall. As you do that, it can make life much easier. But we all make these mistakes, right?
We do. But it doesn't need to be complicated either, does
No.
it? You know, it can be 3 things.
Yeah.
And it's almost more difficult to make it simple. I was chatting to somebody yesterday and they said, oh, we've got some new values announced for January, and couldn't remember them all because there were 8.
That's too much.
It's too many.
Too many.
Too many. And I think that, 3 or 4 is all anybody's ever going to remember. So if you give them more than that, they pick their favourite ones anyway. But it doesn't have to be complicated.
No. In fact, doesn't have to be complicated. Absolutely cannot.
Should not be complicated.
Should not be complicated. And whether you're talking about culture, values, or even strategy. I remember in corporate life having worked with some really brilliantly clear strategies that you could get a piece of A4 and scribble it out. You could be in a meeting room and scribble it on a wall. And then it changed and it was a very, very complicated picture. And I remember asking a team of people just if they could write it down, and they couldn't. And so if you can't hold it, and importantly, if your team can't hold it in their heads, then it
meaningless.
loses. Yeah.
Because under pressure, you should be making decisions against it, really, if it's right.
Totally.
And you've done the thinking properly.
Totally.
Yeah. Interesting.
But going back to that person role system, there comes a point, and it's an uncomfortable inflection point, where actually you have to start defining a system as you're scaling, because ultimately the system will take over the individuals. I mean, you just need to look at any big corporation. Once upon a time, it was a collection of individuals that grew it to whatever, huge organization it is now. But now it's a system that has a number of roles that are filled by individuals. So it's a top down, and maybe that's not an aspiration. Maybe that's not what founders are aspiring towards, but it happens as you grow, because you can't continue to be at the center of everything. You can't continue to run the business at 50 people, at 150 people, as you could at 10 people. Just doesn't scale.
No, it doesn't. Which segues us nicely onto another one of our themes, which is process, I think.
Yes.
Because actually it's the same thing, isn't it? Defining your culture or your strategy or your values, and that they are all ways of creating clarity for a business in terms of how we do things around here. And we use that phrase a lot because I think it's a good way of cutting through all of that stuff and talking to people about, really all this stuff is just about being able to talk about how we do things here and be able to illustrate that for somebody and get it across. And we see resistance to that, but we also often see resistance to process, don't we?
We do. You're smiling at me. We do. And why do we see resistance to process?
We see resistance to process because it feels like anti-agility. It feels like anti all of the things that, to your point earlier about what got you here won't get you there. It feels like it's going to put a big old bomb under, or actually, no, it's going to really nail down and tie down all those things that have made us feel really agile and able to respond to opportunities and different from what's already out there. You know, we're working with people who are inherently rebellious, who are inherently disruptive. They think they see a better way than what has gone before, and that's why they create a business in the first place. They think they can do better. And actually, all the founders we've spoken to so far, in one way or another, have done better. Somebody said to me about the Social Shepherd, they launched when I think it might even have been Zoe, they launched when everybody said social media agencies were dead. Oh, no, it's Kelly, actually, from Podcast Labs. And they cut through and created something out of apparently nothing. And the same with Swift and GoHenry created something that had never gone before. And they're rebels at heart. And so process and really deciding on one way of doing things and telling people that that's the way we're going to do things feels like the antithesis of who they are. Yeah. And there's, you know, we'll come on to talk about identity crisis, and I think it's wrapped up with that as well. But process feels as though it's going to slow them down ultimately. And it's, you know, process feels like anti-agility. And we know and have demonstrated for a lot of our clients that it's the opposite of that, isn't it? Those founders will have a certain process in their mind and a set of guardrails. And that process is sort of almost as simple as see problem, fix problem, next problem. And, you know, there will be a sort of methodology almost in their minds about how they find problems and solve them. And there's an expectation that everybody will work in the same way. But actually, everybody's got their own context. Everybody's got their own inherent priorities and natural ways of doing things. And past a certain point, it doesn't work for everybody to do things in different ways. It becomes inefficient. It slows you down. And the resistance that we get is often from a misunderstanding of that, isn't it?
I think the resistance is born out of the allergy to a corporate way of
we
being.
Don't want to be corporate. We hear that so often.
Yeah. Because that is...
Well, often they're blue chip black sheep, as that
exactly.
lovely phrase suggests.
Exactly. It's the resistance to that because the perception is that that is cumbersome and lacking in creativity and missing opportunities. Now, we're not here to discuss whether that be the case or not, but, you know, if I think back to one of the 5 principles at Mars, it's about freedom in a framework. And Jim Collins in Good to Great, he talks about a culture of discipline, freedom and responsibility. And what I think is interesting is that some of these rebellious founders, and it's not just the 3 that have been on the podcast, by the way, it's others that we talk to, is this belief, and I think misconception, that agility and process are mutually exclusive. I mean, I would not be someone that would be wanting to spend a lot of time documenting and going through a detailed process. But absolutely, I have seen and I know that teams perform best, businesses perform best when there are guardrails, as you say, when there's some structures, some disciplines in place. But again, I think it's to do with business development and maturity and growth, because to your point, in the early days when it's a founder, there's 2 or 3 of you, you all know each other, you understand each other really well. You don't need to talk about actually the process because it's
implicit, isn't
correct.
it? Yeah.
It's clear. It's like the culture. It's clear for everybody. But as you grow and as you bring new people in, they want to know and they need to know. And we use this phrase quite a lot where we talk to people about slowing down to speed up because you hit a critical mass, I think, where it feels like you're slowing down by having to follow a process, but actually the whole thing is sped up. And I know this from some of the work that we've done with Swift. Yeah. And it's interesting because the feedback I've had is, oh yeah, I used to be able to do this and this and this, and I could make a decision like this, but now I have to do this. So yes, maybe you can't get something just done quickly over a 5-minute phone call at 7 p.m. in the evening because you've got to follow a process that you've created, by the way. but a recognition that it's the sense of calm, because there's no surprises, there's no curved balls, there's no, hang on, I thought we'd decided this, that, all of that goes. And I mean, it's an analogy that I like using. It's like you're on the motorway and you can see that it's busy, and you think, and you say, no, I'm not going to stay on here. I'm going to take a turn off, and you go, along some back roads and, past a school and round the back of an industrial estate, and you really feel like you're moving and you're getting places. And then you join back on the motorway and you're exactly where you were before, maybe a couple of cars behind. You just think, oh. but you've wasted so much energy in doing that.
Yeah, but it feels like energy, doesn't it? It's really interesting because so many of the businesses we work with are, and I think this has to be the case, by the way, to get to where they've got to. You have to be quite high drama. You have to be able to create drama around things, or at least want the dopamine hit or something. There's an energy around getting shit done.
Yeah.
And slowing down, again, it feels like the antithesis of that. But if you can nail down 80% of the day-to-day and the things you do in the day-to-day, and really sort of take away any drama, unnecessary drama around the things that just should be routine, then you create space for the things you want to go after, for the innovation, for the new ideas. And actually, that's the hump we often find ourselves helping people get over, is that breaking down that belief system that this is going to make us boring and staid and corporate, and it's actually reducing the exceptions you don't want to deal with so that you can create the ones you do.
And it's all to do with the growth, because as the business grows, as you put in layers of management, if you are still getting drawn into all of the detail that you were before, just by the very nature of the fact that the business has grown, it leaves you less and less time to do the stuff that...
Just so many different things.
To do the stuff that created the business in the first place. Because there just wasn't so much to do. I think Kieran talks about the decisions and still have to solve the problems or make the decisions, solve the problems, but it's just they're bigger ones now, or they have more of an impact. But again, without a process, you will get dragged in because you are the process.
Hi everybody. Just a reminder, I'm Rebecca Morley and we are Third House. We help ambitious entrepreneurs to become better, more intentional leaders. You can find us at wearethirdhouse.com. There you can find a free, really quick 5-minute assessment that you can take to see where you are on your leadership journey and to learn more about working with us to shape your own leadership path. Now back to the episode. So for anyone that's listening, and the question that's sort of rumbling around my head at the moment is, if I was listening to us chatting, I'd be thinking, what process? What are the processes I need? Because actually, again, same as we were talking about values and culture, it doesn't have to be complicated, does it? There's probably a few really key processes that anyone needs in their business. Like for Swift, for example, because they are a business that launches product year on year, we have helped them build a new product development process in order that launching a new product doesn't overwhelm any particular individual, and everybody that needs to do their job as part of that can actually do the right job at the right time and things happen smoothly. What other processes are there that need to exist in businesses so that anyone listening can think, oh, I don't have that?
A people process, an agreed way of working is we will have monthly one-to-ones. We will set objectives.
You will know if you're doing a good job or not.
Exactly. So
at certain points in the year.
A process around people, and I would include recruitment into that as well. So process around people. Process around product for sure, if you're a product-based business. A process, I'm going to say this from a supply chain background, but a process on how you are managing your business.
Demand, forecasting.
Exactly. Yeah, business management based on your strategy.
So resource planning, capacity planning, that sort of numbers planning, cash flow, all of that. And you can roll it up into an S&OP or an IBP if you want. But
well, I was trying to avoid using those acronyms in case they're not very
boring.
Yeah, in case they're not very user friendly. But
they're not. But they are, some version of checking in on your numbers on
creating
repeat
a backbone
with the people that matter.
Correct.
Yeah, it's the backbone. It's the scaffolding.
Creating the backbone of the scaffolding for your business.
Yeah.
So that process And actually an MPD process, new product process, I would say actually sits secondary to that. If I was allowed to, it's the backbone. It's coming out of your strategy. You have to know what it is you're doing, and your team have to be able to repeat that back. It has to be simple and clear enough that everyone knows what we're doing, where we're going, what's my part in it, and then how that plays through, and you are checking in, and everyone can see having visible business performance. But and then the process that you have for managing your people, your talent within that.
I don't know if it's because you're talking about process to me, but the other one that's popping up for me is about, and I'm really resisting calling it what we used to call it in corporate world, because we really, really do try and steer away from corporate, but activity management, like decision making around the things that we're going to do, is so important, because I think it's that same, sort of lurching from one opportunity to another, or lurching from one problem to another. And the whole business, somebody described it to me yesterday as like watching under 11s football. I do, because I have a 10-year-old child, and often there's 22 kids all clustered around
Chasing
the ball.
a ball.
And a business can look like that if you don't have the right processes in place for deciding who's going to be in what position on the pitch. And, it's to create new things. For example, we know Swift are opening new stores and planning to. So how do they decide what order to do those in, and who's going to be involved, and all of those kind of things?
And that takes me back to the strategy point, because when you've created that gives you a filter.
Yeah.
And going back to the process versus agility, that doesn't prevent you from doing anything, because when you set the strategy, all you're doing is saying, this is our intention and this is our plan. And if suddenly you see something big and an opportunity, well, then you put it through the filter. And then you're having a conversation. It becomes part of a process. You're having are we going to do this? We didn't have this on the plan in January, but actually, and if everyone agrees, it's okay. You can change your own process. You are not wedded to it until the end of time, but it just stops the 22 kids, the shiny object syndrome.
Yeah.
You pressure test it from every angle before you then make the big decisions.
And all the people that need to do things to make this thing happen,
Yeah, of course,
know what things they need to do.
Because
and
when that doesn't exist, and suddenly you hear from somebody informally, oh, do you hear we've just launched a such and such? What? Sorry, what? Hang on, why didn't I know about that?
Yeah.
What? I'm the warehouse manager.
Yeah.
When's this stuff arriving? And this happens in businesses that we work with. And what that does, that creates noise. That creates unnecessary drama.
And drag.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because then you've got people on the back foot then trying to catch up once they've got over themselves.
Yeah, it's interesting. And we haven't talked about the three pillars so we've talked about the three layers that we work through with clients. And we have three pillars in Third House as well. We've got Connect, Empower, Ignite.
Yep.
And really what we're talking about here, although it maybe should sit in the Empower piece, it's around clear and connected.
Yes.
It's within that Connect pillar. It's making sure that people that need to, like I said, know their part in delivering are connected in, because otherwise you're disengaged from the start. You've got that person drag as well who thinks, oh, I found out about this late. It's a decision I wasn't involved in. And that you're always going to get this sense of sort of running to keep up or running to catch the bus. And actually what you want is everybody on the bus and focused on the right things.
And I'm smiling because you're absolutely right. That first column is Connect. Second is Empower. And that's exactly where I land, going back on this process versus agility actually not being these two mutually exclusive factors, because once you've connected people, then you can empower them. Because what you're looking for is high standards, high accountability, low bureaucracy. You can only do that when you have created that clarity, when you have got your teams connected. And that's when you can empower them properly.
Yeah.
And I say properly because empowering somebody isn't just saying, do that.
No.
It's not even really delegation. It's more than that. Empowering somebody is confidence in yourself or your leadership team that you have set up the guardrails effectively enough. You have set the destination clearly enough and you have recruited in the right way. And you can say to your teams and your talent, get on and do this.
Yeah.
And that's where the magic starts to happen.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think delegation is, I would say, in the one-to-one coaching I do, certainly, even with the most senior leaders we work with who are running businesses with thousands of people in there. Delegation is one of the trickiest subjects and the trickiest things to get right, because you've got to get to that top role, whether that's in an organisation with thousands of people or where you're scaling a business. You have to have very exacting standards. You have to really know your stuff and be good. And actually trusting other people to be as good as you is so tricky. And often when people are hiring, they take a long, long time to hire. They want to get the right person. That person finally arrives and there's a to-do list on their desk before they even get there. And what happens is that delegation starts before they've even walked through the door. And yet it's another example of slowing down to speed up. The thing I, more often than not, talk to people about when it comes to delegation is, again, going back to that clear and connected piece, you've got to do that first. You've got to help people with enough detail to do a good job right from the outset to maintain that quality. Whereas actually what happens sometimes is the leaders we work with think, well, I've hired a good person. They're really smart. I'll give them the opportunity to prove to me what they can do. And with a really, really short brief of probably one sentence or several words. And that person goes along with sort of very little information until finally the leader comes in at the end and says, no, this is what I wanted, and finally gives them the information they probably should have had at the start. And it's really interesting. They'll get into detail when it comes to problem solving, but don't want to get into detail with setting people up for success.
Yes, but and it creates this situation and circumstance where sometimes there'll be an engagement for us and it will be, these people are broken, fix my team.
Fix my team.
Fix my team.
How often have we heard that?
Yeah, fix my team, they're broken. Yeah. And what's happened is a brilliant founder, leader, has recruited some brilliant individuals and given them a couple of things to do, but without painting the bigger picture, without setting the context, without being clear on the strategy.
What a good job looks like even.
Exactly. Without taking the time to build. So then what happens is the individual is left kind of going, I think I'm doing this right. I'll do this. I mean, when I'm coaching people in that space, I tell them if there's a gap, then that's leadership. Leadership starts with yourself. Lead yourself, step into that gap. Don't necessarily wait, to be told that. If the gap is there, create it for yourself. But from the other side, it's very easy for that CEO, founder, leader to say, what's wrong? Like, I've recruited them and they're not meeting expectations. I've made a mishire, going to have to get rid. And in those moments, what do we talk about?
Setting people up for success, creating the conditions for success.
Creating the conditions for success, but also looking inwardly.
Yeah.
And taking hyper responsibility. I would say to anyone, if you think there's somebody not performing in your team, what have you not done? Where have you failed to set them up for success? And to reference good to great again, it's the window in the mirror. When things aren't going as you expect them to go, look in the mirror. Yeah.
And, you build that chain where that mirror naturally comes up and you go, oh, what
and we have to handle that carefully, right? Yeah. You can't just say, well, you might be the problem. You can't start there. And that's not always the answer either.
It's not.
But there is, when we talk about the conditions for success for individuals, as we speak about the 3 pillars, making sure that they are connected, making sure that they are empowered, properly empowered.
With trust, yeah.
Yeah, that is crucial, the with trust piece. And that is a lot about appreciating and accepting that people are going to do things in different ways. They're going to work in different ways and the output might look different. I mean, I have this conversation with someone that I'm coaching that there are different ways of achieving the same result and they are total perfectionists and they believe that unless it's how it was in their head, it's wrong.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult when you have somebody with 20 years of experience that can't see that.
And we haven't talked about that last pillar, actually, which is ignite.
Yeah.
And I think it's really easy to sort of forget about it. But because connect and empower are such important pillars to put in place, that's where the foundations come in. But ignite, that third pillar that we talk about, is really about making sure the energy's in the right place.
Correct.
And a big part of that pillar is about having brave conversations and being brave and creating, the environment for people to succeed in. And often for the leaders we work with who haven't, and Louise Hill talked about having the grounding in graduate leadership schemes and being taught how to be a manager, she learned how to manage somebody. And often the people we're working with have never had that formal training. And so those brave conversations are really tricky to have. You don't want to break your team. You don't want to demotivate them. You don't want to say the wrong thing. And failing to have those means a downward spiral, right? It's disempowering to not know when you're the person in that position being led by somebody who is not happy with what you're doing, but won't say it to you.
The other thing, just as you reference back to Louise, the other thing that really struck me from that particular section of the conversation was, even with all of her graduate training and her corporate background and all of the investment in her own development and leadership, when she was talking about having that first line of management and she was saying, why is this team not performing? She's like, oh, I know, because we've not invested in them. We've not taught them. We've not helped them. And I mean, that's happened with a couple of clients we've worked with, where a founder, a CEO has gone, help. Mm-hmm. And then actually what's become very clear very quickly is that people are promoted because they are technically, operationally, functionally very, very brilliant at what they do. And there is, I don't know, an assumption, I guess, it's not even a belief, an assumption that they can then recreate that magic to a team of 2, 3, 5 people. Yeah. And actually what we know and where we often are then called in to help is where that's just, it's not natural. And even people that have got good natural leadership skills, you still need to take them out the fire, help them work through, understand what's important, how you're going to behave, and exactly those 3 pillars that we're talking about. How are you going to ensure your team are connected? How are you going to empower them, set them up for success? And how are you going to get them excited and get them doing what they need to be doing in the best possible way? Yeah,
it's interesting. And we often see that more. Well, I was about to say we have to see it more in the creative space, because you've got really brilliant creatives who are then sort of jettisoned into a leadership role, and they're having to manage other people who are equally creative and have brilliant ideas. And they struggle to give feedback because it feels very subjective, I think, often. And, it's not unique to creatives. I think it probably happens in sales, marketing, even finance probably, and supply chain. But it's more in that ideas space, isn't it, where people really find it very difficult to have those brave conversations. And that's often where we get brought in, especially with agencies and things, to work in that space.
Yeah. And just those brave conversations, if I reference it back to the Kieran conversation, he spoke about focusing on the depersonalizing it, focusing it on the what and the role. And again, I think that's where the layers that we work at, person, role and system, really help, because what you're talking about is what a system expects, tolerates, and then what the role requires, and then the individual. And when you can frame it that way. But again, if you are a newly promoted manager in your early 30s and no one has ever stopped to explain that, share that, you think, well, you can go into a conversation and it can be really clumsy, and you can really do some damage actually to somebody's career, their confidence. And the same thing, it slows the business down. It's never the what, it's always the how. And I have seen actually some of the toughest conversations happen and yet people will give more. Because
Yeah.
when you can have the conversations, when you can share vulnerability, when you can be transparent, actually that it connects with people.
It creates connection. Yeah, it's in those vulnerable, sort of tricky moments that actually you create that connection. And it's interesting that you just say a newly promoted manager in their 30s. Two of the people we've interviewed so far on this podcast were essentially newly promoted in their late 20s, early 30s, and running businesses at significant scale with very little know-how of how to do that at that scale. And it's fascinating that you are responsible for all of those people. And you're essentially making up as you go along. And, again, I think it's really interesting. So many of the clients we've talked to along the way have tried to wait until they're in a better place to get support.
Yeah.
Because they sort of don't want someone to come into their messy house, if you like. They want to have a tidy up before you get there. And it can be too late by that point. It's interesting.
Yeah, I liked Kieran saying, if you find yourself thinking about you too much, in the wrong spaces, and I think that's right. It's when there is discomfort or when you feel like something isn't working like it used to, when the magic is
it's off.
Yeah.
Vibes off.
Yeah, when something is off.
Yeah. It's interesting. We're just talking about that sort of, new manager, 30s, whatever, finding themselves in that position of responsibility. And we talked about person, role and system earlier. There is a need at various different inflection points. And again, all of those different episodes so far have talked about the inflection points and spotting them when they look back more than when they're in them. But there is a point, or there are points at which you have to recast your role, right? You have to start to operate at a different level. And we've talked about pretty much all of the themes that we've drawn out of those episodes, except for one, which is that identity crisis piece. And it really does come with that need to recast your role. And often for founder CEOs especially, they're dopamine junkies, aren't they? And they love that, like the thrill of the chase, the spotting of the opportunity, the solving of the problem, the seeing a number in a spreadsheet and going, that looks wrong, I'll go and sort of dig in. But that starts to, at a certain scale, cause more issues than it solves. Right?
Yeah, well, I mean, Kieran said that himself on the podcast, didn't he? And actually, I have another example of not any of those businesses, but of a commercial director saying that he was in a spreadsheet one evening and he could see the founder that was not even really still operationally involved in the spreadsheet messing around with his numbers. Like, what is happening here?
Yeah. So, I mean, we see it even in the really big businesses. There's tinkering.
Yeah,
and there's sort of wanting to, I don't know, scratch that old itch or sort of prove to yourself that you've still got it. Because the bigger stuff takes longer to find. It takes longer to bring to fruition. It's less high octane. There's less of an immediate kind of positive feedback loop from fixing and doing. So, yeah, we help with that identity crisis often.
Well, just before you go on to that high octane thing, I mean, again, Kieran said if we couldn't fix it in a week, then we didn't focus on it. So you're in this
very intentionally.
You're in this intense, this dopamine hit. And I remember you and I once having a conversation where we were planning for a session with a client, and you said, it's like all they want to do is play whack-a-mole and I'm trying to teach them how to play chess. And again, it's that slowing down to speed up. That's really, really difficult. I mean, one, coming off the dopamine hit, but two, well, so who am I? Because Zoe spoke a lot about this. In fact, they all did, but Zoe was talking about literally all the hours, apart from 2, I think. But 22
hours a night,
invested into this business. And so it is not something that they do, it's something that they are. You cannot take it lightly how difficult then that transition is. And there's a book, Transitions.
Yeah.
William Bridges.
Yeah.
it's about major life changes, but it's not really spoken about very much, that founder identity and the transition. But when I think about that, some of the themes in that, it's the same. Are you hovering around?
Yeah.
Into the spreadsheet? You jumping into the detail? Are you resisting? In this case, the professionalizing the process. You're resisting what actually you probably know needs to come. Are you a bottleneck? And are you finding you having emotional reactions to things? And so
there will be people listening.
Yeah, tick. That's okay. That just means that you are a founder going through a transition. And it's very normal. But I think the frame for that is you have been a hero of that business. And the frame change is moving from being a hero of that business, being at the center of that hub and spoke, into becoming the architect of the next phase of that business. And as I say, I don't think that is an easy transition to make, but it is a transition.
I think it's a really tough transition, actually. And we know a guy called Damien Routley, who's now at Founders Factory because of this realisation, but he ran a business called Glow Media. And he said, looking back, he sees business as an alphabet. And he's realised that he's only really interested in the A to J bit. Because past K, it is all about putting process in and scaling and tying as much down as you can and almost making it as boring as you possibly can. And he said he only realises that looking back, and he's now at Founders Factory helping businesses go from A to J before they spit out into various different
I think I'm probably a J to P person.
Yeah. I think I probably sit somewhere between F and M because I like that sort of transition. But it's a really interesting thing because I think, there is this sort of need to cling on to it and sort of see it through. But actually for some people, their strengths really are in bringing something to inception and creating something out of nothing through seeing that idea, through being the problem solvers. You may not be someone that can take that business through that next phase. Is it your season? Because you may not be there for a lifetime. Yeah. And it may not be getting the best out of you anymore.
Look at the transition that Louise has just made.
Yeah.
And she was happy to make that transition.
And actually some of it might be about seeing your role as getting the business ready for you to transition out and seeing it kind of like that. Like Shake and Udder, for example. Those founders saw that they didn't want to operate the business at the scale it could go to, and so brought a CEO in who we know, and we started to work with them at that point. But coming back to the identity crisis piece, it's tricky, isn't it? Because even if that's not the case, and it's you're not even at J yet, maybe you're somewhere still at G or H, you do still need to be able to shift role, to shed that skin.
Yes.
And to be able to adapt and adjust to what the business needs from you now.
Yes.
And get your kicks somewhere else.
And does Kieran not refer to that as the layers of the onion?
Yeah.
And Louise talks about a refresh every 6 months, doesn't she?
Yeah. Yes. Oh, yeah, she does. Really, really intentionally. Every 6 months, really thinking, what does the business need from me at this point?
Yeah.
And I would argue that for quite a lot of the people that we do one-to-one coaching with, or even the team stuff, that happens potentially more frequently even than every 6 months, really thinking about what does the business need from us. And you always are the same person, essentially. And it's understanding, how do I deploy the strengths that I have, and how do I go back to those values that I've got? And, how do I translate that into the role that the business needs me to play now?
And does that motivate me? And that's a very individual question. How long is this road? But whilst they're on it, there has to be an appreciation, understanding that you have to keep developing and growing. And one of the things that we talk about regularly is often the business growth can outpace the growth of the individuals, of the members of the team. That can include a CEO as much as it can include a finance director, as much as it can include a junior member of the team. And it's very difficult because when you're chasing after the growth, when your demand is outstripping your supply and you're running fast to catch up, you're not focusing on yourself and you're not focusing on development. And it's only when you stop and take a breather and there's it's not looking quite as clean and tidy as you would like, that's when you stop and reflect.
So I think all that leads us on to that point we made earlier, which we haven't talked about, bottlenecks. And, that identity crisis is often what leads a founder or a CEO to become a bottleneck, because you're so sure of the value you add to the business as a problem solver, as an idea generator, as a default decider of things, that actually you stay at the wrong level. Because that's where your identity is. That's where you add value because it's proven. And you start to work at the wrong level, which ultimately pushes everybody down. And the thing we sometimes hear from boards is that if the founder isn't operating at the right level, then that drags the board into the detail. And you that founder's often, or CEO has often got themselves into that place because they don't want a boss, and all of a sudden they end up feeling like the board is a boss or is in charge, and that pushes the leadership team down. It pushes everybody down into the wrong space. So I guess the trick for us is to help, or again, keep going back to person, role, system, don't we? But to really help everybody to understand the role that they play and the value that they add to that business at that stage for what they're trying to achieve.
Yes. But there also has to be a desire from the bottleneck that has to change, because it's not scalable. You have to trust your teams, and you then step out of that role. You don't have to answer everything, nor do you have to check everything, because if you've got a good team and you've set that out, they can just get on with it.
If you've architected it, rather than trying to be the hero all over the place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. But what you're really saying is, in order to no longer be the bottleneck, you have to design that first. You have to become the architect of your system, not the hero. And what we will sometimes hear is, I have to make all decisions. Everyone comes to me when the team fall out, any drama, it's always me, I have to solve everything. And that's right, you do. But you are the one that ultimately can fix that. You have to redesign and then communicate and then hold that position. None of this happens overnight. These are new behaviours. It's new ways of thinking, new ways of behaving. But we see change.
Yeah, we do. And it happens gradually and then quite suddenly.
I was having this conversation with the founder only yesterday. Everything happens very, very slowly, and then it's like that. Yeah. And I think Louise Hill said that as well, didn't she?
Yeah.
But that's the truth.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you one last question that I've asked everybody that we've interviewed so far, because I think that it would be a nice way to wrap this conversation up. So for anybody that's currently navigating the messy middle, which is this transition between the sort of early stage and going through those tricky teenage years to be grown up, right? What's the one piece of advice you would give to a business that's in that middle stage of realizing that it's feeling off and there's something they need to do?
It will feel counterintuitive because you feel like you need to be in it to be solving it. But what you must do is step out and take the time to reflect, take a different perspective, to really look and see and figure out where it is you're going and how you're going to get there next.
And trust that you've created enough momentum and enough of a entity in and of itself that stepping out won't automatically mean it falls over, because I think that's a hangover from the early days, isn't it?
Yeah. And when I say step out, I might only mean for an afternoon at a time. I'm not talking about leaving.
6-month retreat.
No. Although what I'm talking about is just creating the mental space to look at the bigger picture. Yeah. I remember at the Founders Factory and the CEO there, and somebody asked her about, what is the difference between success and failure? And she said, having high quality talent, having the bravery to be agile when you need to. And the third thing that she said was taking an outside perspective. Yeah. And I think about that, and whether that's your board, whether that's us, whether that's a trusted mentor, but that's what I would say if you find yourself in the messy middle thinking, it's just off, then step out. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us on The Third Seat. I really hope this conversation gave you some reflection points, some insights, or some inspiration to think about how you can become a more intentional leader. If you have any questions or any reflections, please do get in touch. We love to hear from you, and we'd love to answer some of your questions in a future podcast. In the meantime, follow the show and do join us again for more conversations with scale-up leaders. We've saved you a seat.